Chapter 5. My first time ever flying was when I was 10 years old. My Uncle Wallace decided it was about time that my brother and I visited him in Arizona. The flight was roughly 3 hours. My mother was conveniently intoxicated, as she had this massive fear of flying. She white-knuckled her Bloody Mary as she gripped the armrest with the other hand. We could never tell if she had dozed off as she wore these large, super dark sunglasses, but every now and then she would toss her head back to take a long, dramatic gulp of the thick red liquid in her cup. Sean sat in between Mother and I, listening to his Walkman and pretending that I did not exist. I had a window seat and watched in fascination as we danced through the clouds. I imagined great, beautiful palaces built out of these fluffy white substances. A palace built for me, the queen. I never fancied myself a princess. Princesses don't do anything extraordinary. They just laid about all day waiting to be rescued. Queens ruled everything. People had to answer to her. I desired to be a queen. This time around, I hardly noticed the scenery as I devoured the entirety of Why Are We Here, and immediately jumped into learning about my chakras. Such fascinating material as I enlightened myself in the midst of first class, nonetheless. I had bought the plane ticket months ago, and at that point in my life, I never flew anything but first class. After reading through the book, I felt rather spoiled, as if I were a princess, the thing I most loathed to be called. I did nothing to earn this life. I was a cruel dictator with no actual authority. I felt entitled to everything, and yet I failed miserably to create anything with this beautiful life that I had been given. I felt rather small and very ashamed. So much needed to change, but I had yet to realize that so much had already changed. As the plane began its descent into the mountains, I felt a sense of excitement. I was in a place I used to think of as boring and desolate, but this place was new, fresh. I was looking at the world with brand new eyes. I was even looking forward to seeing my stupid brother, maybe even establish some kind of real relationship with my mother, one that wasn't based on who I would tell and inspire about it. I would not be plastering pictures on Facebook for everyone to see and love. I would be experiencing life this time around without social media, which reminded me that I had not been on Facebook since my demise. I wondered what had been going on in my absence. There were a ton of notifications waiting to be dealt with that I was just too scared to read. It must be fun to see a friend rise to the top and come crashing down in such vivid details. It's a grab popcorn, settle in, and just watch what kind of life I will lead now kind of experience. Something told me, though, that no one would understand at all what I was going through. The plane landed and jostled the passengers about as the wheels touched the ground. Home? Am I home? It did not feel like a home would, but this was indeed a start. As the plane drastically slowed its speed, the tiny airport came into view. Such a difference from what I had left. I gathered my things and took off my seatbelt as soon as the seatbelt sign disappeared. I got up and stretched my back. The soreness was still there. I was looking forward to sleeping in a real bed that night. My stomach rumbled, and I began thinking of dinner. I had not purged since my fiasco with the vodka. I think my body was getting used to eating regularly and keeping it down. I made the short hike through the airport and on through to the baggage claim area. I was searching frantically for my mother. She was nowhere to be found in this barely populated lounge area at the front. "Kat?" I heard a deep male voice and spun around to see my brother. He had changed since I left the family over 10 years ago. He was tall and towering, his dark locks grazing his eyebrows, steel-piercing, sulky eyes. "Oh, hi," I said in my new soft tone. He looked perplexed, as he was expecting my dominating, forceful, and direct manner. "Boy, New York turned you into a wuss," he shrugged, and turned to walk toward the baggage claim. I followed along in silence. As we approached the carousel, he looked distracted. He probably had way too much to do with his time than pick up his little sister at the airport. I just stood there with my eyes on the carousel waiting for it to spit out my bags, or for him to say something, whichever came first. The carousel saved him from having to force small talk with me. It began turning as I focused on pinpointing my suitcase. As soon as it fell out of the top, I hurried to snatch it up. My brother saw me and dove in ahead to pick it up for me. "I can get my suitcase," I offered. "I know, but I have it," he drawled out. He headed toward the door with my bag in tow. I followed along behind him, trying my best to keep up with his long strides. It was like I had to jog just to keep somewhat close to him. He stopped at a beat-up pickup truck and heaved my luggage up over the back into the bed. He had bungee cords ready to secure it in place. Then he hopped in the driver's seat without uttering a word and started the truck. I quickly jumped in the passenger seat. The drive was starting out just as silently as my cab ride to the airport earlier in the day, but with less scenery. It was too dark for any kind of view. "How's Mom doing?" I asked, hoping he would warm up to me a little. "Good. Not that you ever cared." Okay, I deserved that. "Do you like her new husband?" I asked, not taking the bait for conflict. "He is pretty cool. You'll probably hate him. He is all new age and shit," he sneered. "Sounds interesting." I generally did have an interest in this new man in our lives. "Oh, cut the crap, Kat," he suddenly snapped. "What?" I pleaded. "This is not the great Kathryn Wilde I am sitting next to, driving to our mom's house. This is someone pretending to be scared and even courteous to someone who hates her. Where the hell is the girl that has a rude comment or strong opinion for everything that comes out of my mouth? That's who I was prepared to pick up tonight." He sounded like he was panicking. Was it so awful to pick up a nice version of me? "You still hate me?" I asked quietly. "Kat, those were your words when you headed off to college. Your exact words were, 'I know you hate me, but you are just jealous of my opportunities and success.' Then you rolled your eyes, slammed the door, and I haven't laid eyes on you or heard a word from you until now." He was still holding on to who I was. He needed to let go of that. I was trying to as well. Honestly, I don't know. My life was just turned upside down, and I am not sure of myself anymore. If you have such a problem with me, why the hell did you come to pick me up? Just to get in your abuse before we get to Mom's and pretend to be a family? I was on the verge of tears. He paused for a moment. It was important to Mom. He was taken aback by my explanation. "That was nice of you," I said quietly and sincerely as I focused my attention out my window facing a dark and lonely void. I did not want him to see the tears escaping my eyes. He sat in stunned silence. I know this was surprising and even hard for him to process. The only thought running through my head was, why did this man hate me so much still? That was so long ago. We were so close in age. Even before I went off to attempt to be queen of New York City, his disgust for me ran so deep. I used to feed off of it and project it back to him. Now it just troubled me so much. It was an hour drive to the middle of nowhere. An hour of contemptuous silence with momentary hateful sighs from Sean. What a holiday I was about to have. Here I was, anonymous. No one knew me in this world or was privy to my Facebook page, not even Sean. I was a different person entirely. No one should know of my troubles at work. There were no connections with my 20 best friends or my hundreds of associates. Not one acknowledgement of the tragic circumstances that had just befallen me. I was alone in the world, with just my thoughts and my tortured soul. The reality of just how much I was hated was all too real, as I felt the thick, black energy of someone who hated me permeate my space. How does one cope with a constant barrage of negative energy being hurled at you. I said a silent prayer that I would find the answer to that particular question in one of the books I had just purchased. I sucked up the rest of the ride and tried to relax. Some deep breathing might help. I closed my eyes. A lush and full waterfall, cascading in a sizable body of water in an enormous crashing fashion, appeared in my line of vision. I discarded my clothes and dived in gracefully. I came up for air and felt the cool, forceful flood of water cleanse my entire body. Out of nowhere, a voice with a magical accent I had never heard before. "I've come home." I jerked upright in my brother's truck and peered over at him. He had the most perplexed look on his face. "What did you say?" I asked him wide-eyed. "I said we're home, you freak," he said bluntly. Oh, I must have dozed off. The visualization seemed more like a dream. I got out of his truck, suddenly feeling extremely exhausted. Weak, in fact. Sean retrieved my luggage from the bed of the truck and walked up ahead of me. We approached a large farmhouse secluded in some deep woods. It was hard to make out any details, but it was rather big. I couldn't believe I had never set foot in my mother's house. She moved down here years ago. I felt rather guilty for being absent, mentally and physically, for so long. Suddenly, the door swung open and Mother appeared within the frame of the secondary screen. "You're home," she squealed like a child as she lunged out onto the wraparound porch to lovingly assault me with a hug. My mother had aged significantly since I had last seen her. She still had the long, light curls that seemed more white now, but her face showed the visible signs of years of laughter and frowns. She immediately warmed my heart. "I will take her bags upstairs." Sean pushed past us and stomped into the house and up the stairs. "Honey, this is Alan," she motioned at the man in the doorway, who promptly stepped onto the porch to greet me with a hug as well. In the lighting, it was clear to see that he was younger than my mother, with light features and long, thinning hair that he kept bound in a low ponytail. But they both seemed so ridiculously happy. I immediately felt this intense urge to achieve happiness at that level myself. "It is so wonderful to finally meet you and have you in our home. You are most welcome here," he said in my ear as he hugged me. I felt at ease, but all I could manage to vocalize was a soft thank you. In a daze, I got a quick tour of the house, which consisted of a large kitchen, formal dining room, and living room on the main floor. There was a full-size basement that housed their office space. Upstairs was a massive sprawling out of 3 bedrooms and 1 main bathroom. Further up was an attic which Mother claimed held our childhood. My bedroom was beautifully decorated in soft pastels. It was feminine and absolutely exquisite. "I had it specially decorated for your arrival," she beamed. I felt so humble and in awe of this room. It was like a glorious retreat from the harshness that can be the concrete jungle. "Look at us, standing around, fussing over the tour of our home. You must be starving, sweetheart. How about a late dinner?" Alan spoke up from the hallway outside my room. I nodded and followed them downstairs with a smile. Spaghetti was waiting on the stove, and we all gathered in the formal dining room to partake. Mother dabbed at her eyes as she looked around the full table. "This is all I ever wanted. A table filled with my family," she said. My mother was a completely different woman, so full of calm and peaceful energy. There wasn't a drop of alcohol in sight. She was nothing like the woman who raised me, just like I had changed overnight. I wondered if she had an out-of-body experience as well. It made me so hopeful for my future. Sean looked over at me as if waiting for me to screw up and let my true nature loose. I stayed quiet and enjoyed the meal with what seemed like my new family. It was a strange yet pleasant experience. After dinner, Mother excused herself so she and Alan could go for a late-night walk in the woods. It was their nightly ritual, Alan informed me. They bundled up and headed out the door. I decided to continue to make an effort with Sean and help him clean up. We stood at the sink together as he washed the dishes and I dried them. The house was not equipped with a dishwasher. She really does look happy, a far cry from what she used to be, I mused. She is. Alan is good for her, he said without looking at me. How did they meet? I asked, insanely curious. Yoga. He teaches a yoga class at the community center in town. He seemed to know everything, and I knew nothing. Wow, I am happy for her, I said sincerely. So, are you going to tell me what happened? He asked, finally turning and staring down at me. Why do you want to know? It was my turn to be passive-aggressive. Because I know it is huge. I feel it. Are you in some kind of trouble? He asked, alarmed. Sort of, I answered, head down. Whatever it is, Mom will do anything to help you. I'm going to wager you no longer live in New York. Wow. How incredibly psychic of him. How did you guess that? I asked, wide-eyed and perplexed. Just a hunch. You wouldn't understand. Just talk to Mom as soon as you can. She worries about you. He handed me the last dish and walked out of the kitchen. I hastily dried it and set it in the cabinet before following after Sean, who was putting his coat on near the front door. I understand more than you think, I pleaded with him. He put on a winter hat and pierced me with his eyes. Yeah, well, we will see about that. He went out the door and slammed it behind him. I watched him through the massive picture window in the living room get in his truck and back out. The motion sensor flood lamp illuminated the drive as Mother and Alan came in the back door in the kitchen, back from their walk. She walked in the living room and still found me staring out the window into the now darkened world. I nodded slowly, still gazing out. He will be back tomorrow. Hey, thanks for cleaning up after dinner, she said, going over to the coat rack to hang her coat up. No problem, I said like a monotoned robot. You look tired, honey. Why don't you go on upstairs and try to get some sleep? She put an arm around me as Alan walked in, still smiling, and hung up his coat. I nodded again and hugged her before making the ascent to my room. Good night, Kat. Hope you sleep well, Alan called up at me. Night, I called back down. I got in my room, shut the door, and kicked off my shoes. I barely made it out of my clothes before I felt this intense wooziness. I fell onto my nice new bed. I was thankful to have such a beautiful room to sleep in. As I drifted out of consciousness, the sweet voice of my vision echoed in my head. I've come home. I've come home. I've come home.